Hey, what's good, YouTube? This is Who Is Like God. Welcome back to my Messiah 2024 series. Now, Messiah 2025 because I went into the new year. But we're coming to a close where I examine all these prophecies. And based on looking at them from a neutral perspective, we can see how Jesus or Yeshua is actually proven as the Israel's Messiah. Now, I'm not claiming to be any religious authority in any tradition, you know what I'm saying? I'm just a young man who loves God, who loves to study these things. And these are some of the conclusions that I've reached while studying the scriptures and looking at different people who are more researched than I. And let's dialogue about that is the kind of angle. So that being said, we're going to look at Genesis 12:3 and Psalms 46 verse 10, because they're two different passages, but they sort of telegraph a similar thing. Genesis 12:3. God said, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now here God is talking to Abraham or Abram. Psalm 46:10 says, Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Now, the reason I want to go to those two verses, it shows us a very clear prediction that God has this vision of being exalted and being acknowledged in the entire earth. Because after the Tower of Babel, God chooses Abraham and says, In you I will bless all the families of the earth. And in Psalm 46:10, it reiterates the message that the God of Jacob, who has chosen Israel, still has plans to be worshipped in the entire world. The fascinating thing about this is the fact that for really majority of history, Yahweh, the Most High, was only really acknowledged by the Jews, whether it be in the land or in exile, in the diaspora. You feel me? Most other nations were out here worshiping the one true God, or if they were probably acknowledging him as well as some other deities. You see what I'm saying? Because we have ancient manuscripts that acknowledge the God of Israel exists, but no indication that they're exclusive worshipers of him, like the Torah demands. What is true worship. So God has this desire to be worshipped among all nations, and all these pagan nations, for them to be brought back to God. We could even see this in the book of Exodus, chapter 9, verse 16. Where God says he will be worshipped. He will raise up Israel so that his name may be known in the whole earth. And that reflects what we see in Genesis 12, because Abraham is basically the father of Israel, the father of the Israelite people. Technically, he's the grandfather of Jacob, but just in a general sense, the ancestor of Jacob, who would then have the 12 sons of Israel, the 12 tribes. So God is telling him that in you all the families of the earth will be blessed, which has an implicit implication, in my opinion, of them coming back to know the Most High, because the ultimate blessing for any human being, from a biblical perspective, would be to know their Creator, would be to know God. So God has this plan for Abraham and the whole purpose of Israel to cause these different nations to come back to himself. And he said these things when Israel was all congregated in one place in Egypt. So when God's telling them that I'm raising you up so that everybody else in the world can come to know me, we know he's talking about the nations as they stand, the Gentile heathens as they stand, because this is a time when God says that in Exodus, when all the Israelites would have been concentrated in one place. The amazing thing is that we can see this happen in history, and the huge catalyst for this, for the Gentiles coming to acknowledge the God of Israel exclusively, would be one Jew named Jesus, Yeshua. He would be the catalyst for all these different nations to have this rapid explosion and come to believe in God through him. Now, what's amazing is if you look at within the first 350 years of Christ's arrival, we can see this in multiple empires. We've talked about the Roman Empire in the Council of Nicaea video, because you know the early church had councils within its early Hebraic context in the New Testament, and these things continue as more and more people are grafted in throughout history. But what that reflects is that more people in the same empire that colonized Jesus' people, the same empire that colonized the Israelites, we now have millions upon millions of people that actually believe in Jesus God on account of him by the year 300. I can pull up the stats and the statistics that roughly 10% of the Roman population by the year 300 would have been professing Christians, which in turn means within 300 years of Jesus' effect, who believed he was the Messiah when the temple still stood, the same empire that colonized his people, the same empire that destroyed his very temple, the temple of the children of Israel that the Most High dwelt in. The same empire that would do all of these things within 300 years of Jesus would come to actually acknowledge his God And the reason this is so important is it's not just millions of people among the common population, it's the emperors themselves. I'm looking at 350 years because in the 4th century, we have this really fascinating thing where kings themselves would directly come to Christ across multiple empires, all like around the same time, which is also fascinating and also prophetic. See, this is why you should check out my Messiah 2024 playlist, because we've checked all these things in depth in videos beforehand. But when we look at some of the other prophecies, we can see that there's prophecies that the servant will come and be exalted by kings and by princes. And this will be the vindication to the servant from the Most High that his ministry was legitimate, is the fact that kings and princes would come to receive his message, even though the children of Israel were rejecting it on a large scale. We can look at Isaiah 49, verses 1 to 7, and Isaiah 52, verses 14 to 15. So we're dealing with people outside of the tribes of Israel, outside of the line of David, Gentile kings who did not have the Hebrew scriptures, who did not have the Hebrew prophets, actually come to believe in the God of the Hebrews on account of Christ. So just think about how fascinating that is as a world dynamic, that one ancient Jew from a specific lineage would have such a profound effect, the only one in history to do so, to cause Gentile kings across multiple empires, including the one that colonized his own people, to actually acknowledge the God of Israel, as the scriptures say would happen. Because when we go from a mathematical perspective or a probability perspective, we can see how odd the odds are that one ancient Jew, again, we're talking from a specific tribal lineage of Judah, would do these things, not only in terms of the global effect, but just that in light of all the other things he would do in his ministry and within parameters that are outside his control. Because we can bring in Genesis 49:10, which we've talked about last episode. That gives us a prophecy that the scepter will not depart from Judah until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. So in other words, the tribe of Judah will have a point where they lose its scepter, they lose its authority, and before that point, that definitive point, the Messiah would have had to have come. Now we looked at ancient Jews and we really dug into that to see that they recognize this, and we have a definitive point of when that happened, of when Judah lost his scepter, which effectively means if we take the Torah and different prophecies at face value and look at the things that are proclaimed for the people of Israel and the timing of when this happens in history, as recognized by the Jewish sages as well, not only do we have one ancient individual who believed that they were the Messiah while the temple still stood, do all these things in world history, the fact that this individual would have to come within a closed window is also fascinating, because now the odds just get higher and higher and higher, because our candidate pool for the Messiah becomes less and less and less. The more parameters and the more prophecies we have, the odds just get higher and higher and higher that one specific individual within a specific timeline, within a specific lineage, will do all of these things and be the unprecedented force of that among his people, with the restoration of the priest and his teaching and blessing the people based on that front, and teaching them things they often forgot from the scriptures, but also on the global scale. We talked about the Roman Empire with the millions of conversions and even Emperor Constantine. Basically, Constantine is one direct example of an emperor with former pagan roots who would directly come to Christ. This one Jew from a population he colonized come to believe in his God. But the amazing thing is, again, within this 350 years, it's multiple empires that come to believe in God, all within a short amount of time. We have the ancient kingdom of Axum, which is modern-day Ethiopia. King Ezana was the first king to publicly embrace Christ and make his nation a Christian nation, because beforehand he associated himself with Mars, which was a European deity. But now, on account of Christ, he's coming to believe in Yahweh, the Most High of Israel, the name above all names. So not only do we have that, we also have Armenia with King Pterodactyls. So these are three examples of empires. And the amazing thing is, this is cross-empire. This is cross-continental. Because we know it wasn't just the Roman Empire. There are more empires in the world of multiple kings directly coming to believe in God through Christ, as the prophets say would happen, that there would be this time when kings would come to acknowledge the God of Israel by means of the servant. We could actually see how this happened within close proximity to Jesus by those who held to the message of what the apostles proclaimed about him, right? The true message that we have a paper trail from. The fact that all that would happen goes to show the global effect that Christ would have, that within 350 years, if we think about all these other empires and countries that would come to embrace Christ, would be up in the millions. So one humble carpenter who was rejected by his people in the temple, stood in due time would cause millions of people, not only in his own colonizing empire, but the world at large, when you consider Egypt, when we consider Ethiopia, when we consider Armenia and other places. I'm singling out these places because we have direct conversion of their kings and their sons, which is also another component. Cause them to believe in the God of Israel is millions upon millions and millions of people, and all up to the royal level. So just think about how crazy it is. Like, really think about the odds that most people in the ancient world, just like today, are just trying to survive. That one individual from a specific lineage, as all talked about in the Old Testament, would cause millions of people beyond his time to come to him, which is a vision that he saw himself coming to fulfill, which is something that he saw in the world happening, actually happened. It's a time before social media, think about how crazy it is. He would affect millions of people within 350 years across multiple continents, including their royalty, causing them to believe in God Most High of the Torah and the prophets. I say that to say, when you bring it all back, we know how Genesis says in Abraham, God will bless the nations, all the families of the earth. The Bible gives us very clear genealogies in Matthew and Luke that Jesus was a descendant of Abraham by means of coming from the tribe of Judah. So not only do you have that fulfillment from a lineage perspective, that one person within the right lineage would cause this, but also from Psalm 46:10, that God says he will be exalted in the nations while specifying the means how. So we have these two global prophecies where the scriptures are mentioning things that should happen, that God says will happen, that are falsifiable and testable because they're speaking to a global scale. And when you speak to a global scale, we can look at history outside of the Bible and see clear corroboration of this massive effect that Jesus would have, directly and indirectly. Beyond that, we can look at passages like Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 42, Isaiah 49, that show that the Messiah or the servant is directly connected to causing the Gentiles to come back to God. So it's not just the fact that Jesus would have this effect, it's also the specific ways in which it would happen among the Gentiles, among the heathens, and among their rulers that also match the prophecies of Isaiah in very specific ways. So this is where it gets so beautiful, because it doesn't even need to be a thing about, do I believe these scriptures are from God? It just becomes a mathematical and probability thing at this point, that the odds are so incredibly high, they're incomprehensible. If you actually want to talk about how high those odds are and dialogue about that, I've mentioned Peter Stoner's work, and I've talked about how they're greater than 101 in 100 quadrillion as a base in other videos based on the work of Peter Stoner and things he saw fulfilled in Jesus' ministry, pertaining just to that window of Jesus' ministry, 3-year ministry. There's so much more when we consider things outside of his control, both before his birth and after his ministry, and resurrection, which the apostles proclaimed and legitimately believed, that match the scriptures and motifs in the Old Testament. The odds become even greater when we consider all three ends: the before Jesus time, Jesus' ministry, and the effect he would have as one ancient Jew from a specific lineage, from the royalty of David, causing all these things in the world. It's unprecedented in human history. And we got to appreciate that effect, because all these things are really plain among us, but when we don't study, we don't realize how incredible the Bible is, that it makes such bold predictions that are testable and falsifiable, that have been proven to happen in history, namely because of one individual. And the fact that we have all these nations come to God by means of this ancient messianic belief system, when I really studied that in the original context, we see how consistent these things are from the Hebraic root outward, which can get into these scriptures testify about me and the ancient theology of Plato, to actually understand the nature of God in the original context of the scriptures, what the ancient Jews believed about God, and how the proclamation of Christ in that context is totally consistent. What we have to do is see if Christ is vindicated as the Messiah by things he did and by his consistency to the Torah and the effect he would have on the world as the scriptures speak. If he did things that Messiah was supposed to do pertaining to when he was actually here and the effect he would have. You feel what I'm saying? So all that together, we see the vindication of Christ and how high those odds are. So with that being said, I give praise, glory, and exaltation to my God, and I'll peep you out in the next video. But just consider these things. Consider these things. Honestly, that's my honest prayer, that you would pray about this, because contrary to popular belief, there's a real intellectual side to this stuff that shows it can't just be, it's out of the realm of coincidence. And beyond that, you have the testimonies of every Christian about how, if they're really in Christ, their lives transform, just like in how my own life has transformed. And some other things in my own life, my own testimony, that show God's hand over my life, as well as some other things and other people's testimony, as well as supernatural experiences that show there is a spiritual world, which most people accept. So if we even just look from the perspective of how the truth is stranger than fiction, and all these different things that show how weird our world really is, we can let that sort of be a gateway to study all these things more deeply. From that perspective, see the vindication of Christ, especially from this grid that he claimed to fulfill, being the Old Testament. So I see you all in the next video. I pray this was a blessing. If I said anything confusing, please let me know in the comments so we can dialogue. If you think I'm wrong about anything, let me know so we can dialogue. But outside of just honestly considering these things intellectually, I pray if you're willing to take that step, you would just ask God for the truth, and that he would lead you closer to him, whatever form that may mean. Because if you do that, I sincerely believe he will lead you closer to Yeshua. All praises to the Most High. I see you in the next video. All right. Peace.